We expect to see President Trump in the Oval Office for the first time today, as a federal judge, also for the first time, is now accusing the Trump administration of straight up ignoring a court order, a move that could set up a high-stakes showdown, an existential constitutional showdown, perhaps, between the executive and judicial branches of the government. And the judge laid out kind of a warning shot, saying people who make private determinations of the law and refuse to obey an order generally risk criminal contempt. Keep in mind how the last 21 days have gone down. A political blitz from President Trump, moving fast to do exactly what he said he would do on the campaign trail, on everything from immigration to the economy and beyond. He has signed more executive orders already than any president in their first 100 days. So he's moving fast. But the courts are too. Look at that so-called buyout package, those deferred resignations for federal workers. That is on pause for now as a judge hears arguments on what to do next with that. The administration's effort to slash the USAID workforce, that's paused. A move to get political appointees and special government employees access to the Treasury Department's sensitive and confidential information, that is temporarily blocked. The executive order to end birthright citizenship also blocked. And now some new signals from the executive branch, that's the president and the vice president, that they are not only not happy with those court decisions, but that, in the words of Vice President Vance, judges are not allowed to control the executive's legitimate power.
When a president can't look for fraud and waste and abuse, we don't have a country anymore. No judge should frankly be allowed to make that kind of a decision. It's a disgrace.
Now you've got some legal scholars and critics of the White House warning of the possibility of a constitutional crisis as the Trump administration moves to fundamentally reshape the government. Laura Jarrett is covering the legal angle on this, but I want to begin with Aaron Gilchrist, who is live for us now in Washington. Talk us through what we have seen most recently, Aaron, because the White House has pushed hard over the course of the last 2+ weeks to try to get done what it wants to do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now we're looking at this most recent court decision where this judge in Rhode Island has said that the administration, as you noted, ignored a court order. If we back up a little bit, we're talking about this executive order that froze funding for federal aid going out to different programs here in the United States. 22 states challenged that executive order, and a judge said, all right, pause, let's hold off on freezing that money until we can look at this case more closely. The states in the last few days presented some evidence to the judge, he said, that showed that some cases of funds being frozen improperly had arisen and that there was evidence of that. The DOJ argued back and said that they didn't believe the order carried some of those covered some of those frozen funds. The judge said, yeah, whatever. I want you to make sure you're putting out that money like I said you should be until we actually have another hearing on this particular issue. And so that's the fight now that this White House is facing. Dozens of challenges to some of these executive orders and actions and memos that President Trump has signed in the last few weeks. So, as you noted, so many of those cases, the judges have paused some of those actions, but it does seem as though the actions will continue, Hallie.
What are you hearing about what's next from the White House on the legal front here? They have said all along over the course of the last couple of weeks, whenever any legal issues or legal challenges have come up, the administration has said in so many words, we are confident that we will ultimately prevail. Is that the same tone you're hearing now about some of these issues?
Yeah, that is the prevailing thinking here. In each of these cases, obviously, the Department of Justice, on behalf of the White House, on behalf of the president, is fighting all of these challenges that have popped up in court. And we heard from the president himself saying that some of the judge decisions, these temporary decisions that the judges have made, should not be allowed. You saw that post from the vice president, J.D. Vance, as well, suggesting that the administration could ignore some of these court orders. He's made similar statements in the past about the executive power. There's some debate about whether that is the interpretation that people should walk away with from that post. At the same time, Hallie, you noted that the president is set to sign more executive orders in the next few minutes here. We'll have a tape playback of that, but all signs are that it's full speed ahead for the Trump administration.
I was just about to ask Aaron, set the table, because I know you will be with us. We expect, I think, the members of the pool, that small group of reporters that is able to go into the Oval, to be there in a couple of minutes when the president does do some more of these signings, right? Typically, these have turned into almost like impromptu small news conferences, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, you're right. Typically, an executive order is not something that draws a lot of fanfare. This was supposed to be a closed press. We weren't supposed to have access to this signing. That changed at some point today. Now cameras will be allowed inside. And in almost every instance where we've watched the president sign executive orders, he's also fielded questions as he was signing his signature from the reporters, producers, and others in the room. So yeah, it's reasonable to think that that will happen again today. And we'll hear more about how he feels about judges and some of the actions that he's already taken by executive order.
Aaron Gilchrist, live for us outside the White House. This is not going to be the last time we talk today. I know. Aaron, thank you. Let me bring in our legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett. So, Laura, here's the thing. There are things that the White House, that the Trump administration could legitimately do if they do not like a court ruling, right? Sure. Like they could appeal.
Absolutely. And the DOJ has signaled that they will continue to do that. They've already done that in some cases. And we should understand here, to get sued happens all the time. That in of itself is not breaking news. What's so unusual here, that I want to underscore what Aaron said, is the idea that the Trump administration would not follow through on a judge's order. Now, they could say, sorry, our bad, we thought the order didn't cover it. But if they continue now not to release the federal funds after the judge has told them that they are violating a court order, that's when the rubber starts to meet the road. And I think that's why you hear all these questions and all of this sort of worry about a constitutional crisis. When you talk about that, what that means is one branch telling another branch, go take a hike. That's what that means. Now, we haven't seen that yet, but that's the worry.
So listen, some of this is necessarily hypothetical, so I know we're entering the land a little bit of speculation. But what happens if, in fact, the Trump administration does continue to not release that funding?
Well, so then the plaintiffs would have to go back. These Democratic-led states and groups would have to go back and say to the judge, remember when you told them they weren't following the order? They still aren't doing it. And then it gets interesting to think about what the judge wants to do there, because criminal contempt is not something you see very often. It does happen when people don't follow court orders. But then it's like, who's going to enforce that, Hallie? Not this DOJ, right? They're not going to prosecute a criminal contempt case. And so that's when you start to see some really interesting questions arise. And it just sort of underscores, I think, how much of our system depends on norms, right? None of this stuff is really written down. It's just typically done that way. And when it starts to not be done that way, it raises questions about who's going to enforce it. Where are the checks and balances?
In this particular instance, what is the timeline now for the Trump administration to comply with what this judge has asked?
They need to do it immediately, or the plaintiffs are going to run back in court and say that they're not doing it. They could also appeal the judge's order, and they can go as far as they want to the Supreme Court, Hallie. But again, at a certain point, once the Supreme Court tells you you're not following the law and they don't follow it, or if they win that round, I should say, then we're in different territory.
We've laid out a couple of the sort of legal issues that are facing some of the president's more high-profile moves that he has made over the course of the last 21 days. Is there any sort of concern or thinking around precedent setting from this particular Rhode Island case that could extend to other cases? Or are these just so individualized, Laura, that we've got to take them piece by piece?
They're kind of all over the place. And we should understand here that the temporary restraining orders that you're seeing done are temporary for a reason. They're not supposed to last forever. And so they're supposed to be just maintaining the status quo. The issue here is that judges are now extending them beyond the regular just 14 days and saying, we think this is really legally problematic. And so now we're just going to put them on hold indefinitely. And that's why the Trump administration, I would imagine, is going to appeal most of these, because they want their initiatives to go through.
Laura Jarrett, thank you very much for that breakdown. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.